So hey guys, welcome to the newest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. I hope you guys are listening to this episode from a remote and isolated location. And talking about remote, I have two great guests with me who are going to talk about remote working in this episode. So we have the both of the co-founders of Flatworld.co. We have Gilad Bornstein, who is currently the co-founder of Flatworld.co, and before this, he was a senior VP of engineering at Crossover, which is the largest remote work company in the world. Along with Gilad, we have Ronen Rubinfeld, who's the other co-founder of Flatworld.co. So let's get to know more about Gilad and Ronen. So hey guys, welcome to the show.
Hey Sunil, thank you for having us.
Yeah, so I had a call with Gilad before this, so I know a bit about him, but let's get to know Gilad as well. But before that, I also want to know more about you, Ronan, and let's get start with your intro.
Sure. Okay. So thanks, Sunil, for hosting us tonight, late night, I guess, in your place. So as you mentioned, together with Gilad, we founded Flatworld.co about 6 to 8 months ago. We'll talk more about Flatworld.co in a second, but before that, let me introduce myself. So I bring a background in software engineering and software management for the last 20 years or so. I used to work as a software engineering manager in some of the largest corporates here in Israel, like SAP, then HP Software, and also Philips Healthcare. Actually, I had very good opportunities to work with colleagues from India in most of those cases, which I enjoyed a lot.
Nice.
And during all of those roles, I find myself dealing a lot with the how things should be done. What's the right process for doing the development and the engineering activities? What's the right way to build an organization? So
Right.
not only dealing with the product itself, but with the structuring and the operation of the team, of the organization in general. I had some great opportunities to lead some very interesting initiatives such as adoption of scalable agile throughout the business unit, which I was part of in Philips Healthcare, which was a great challenge, and had other opportunities to practice with agile and dev processes in general.
That's great.
That brought me to a decision to take a path of as a consultant, and for the last 5 years, I work as a consultant and supporting many companies in defining, shaping, and executing their development processes and building their organization. And maybe just few last words to tell how I get connected to remote work and how Gilad and I met each other. So Gilad will tell in a second about his experience and the great opportunity he had in a crossover. But as we came to know each other for our careers, we had the opportunity to chat a lot about what remote work is. And I find it very interesting and very appealing in terms of from the process perspective. We will discuss later on during this conversation about remote work and touch about some of those points. But in general, remote work will succeed or will fail based on the level of adoption of the processes, the discipline in implementing it.
Right.
And this is exactly the point where I got touched with remote work and connected to remote work. And after Gilad will tell a bit about his experience, we'll tell you more about Flatworld.co and how we came to found it. Gilad.
Sure. Over to you, Gilad.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to be brief. Very similar to Ronen, I was an engineering executive for more than 20 years before I met the remote work world for the first time. As you've mentioned, I joined a couple of years ago a company called Crossover, which is a fully distributed company with 3,000 workers spread around the world in more than 130 different countries. That was the first time that I learned about remote work at scale. Right? So I always worked with other offices in my previous corporates, but that was the first time that I really was part of such an organization. And as a engineering executive, I've always had the fetish, I call it, to build high-performing teams. And I was always trying to steal talent, from my peers and be the first one to go and grab a new hire and so on. And when I joined Crossover as a senior VP, I found out that, guess what? The world is full of amazing talent, and this talent actually would love to work in a remote work job, right? And because of that, I was able to build what I call today hyper-performing teams in Crossover in a relatively easy fashion. I mean, compared to hiring locally, right? There are tons of people out there in the world, really smart, really technical, fun to work with. And when you are hiring remote, you are exposed to all of that. The entire world is your playground. That's pretty amazing. At Crossover, I was also in charge over the technical hiring funnel, where we had about 7,000 applications every week coming in. Okay, that's one of the largest technical hiring funnels in the world, I guess. And that was again an amazing experience. The reach out to the talent and then filtering the talent and so on. And at one point, Ronen and I, which we've been friends before and we've been discussing, he was, with me during my journey, and I just told him, Ronen, this is amazing. This is the future of work, and it's not a future; it's happening now. Amazing
Right.
companies like Crossover, but others, right, like Elastic, HashiCorp, Automatic, Buffer, Envision, are being built around, fully remote or fully distributed operation, and every hiring manager out there needs that. And
Right.
that's when we started discussing this, bringing my experience and the world I've seen of remote work together with his know-how of processes and the simulation of new engineering practices into organizations, and that's how and when we decided to set up Flat, actually.
That's really interesting. So I think you both are really deep into this whole remote work culture, and that's what I guess Flatworld.co is about. And I guess you would have great perspectives to talk about the current situation where a lot of companies are forced to go remote. So I think there are companies who choose to be remote, and there are now companies who didn't respect the remote workforce or working culture, but now they are forced to go remote. So what happens to those companies? So let's talk more on that. I think the whole COVID-19 situation has put the companies into like instantly curing or instantly coming up with something which is like a band-aid, right? So working from home has become like a band-aid. They companies are using it as a band-aid nowadays. Like they're not prepared for it firstly, and now they don't know if they're going to be permanently remote, or even after this pandemic is over, or they're going to be just temporarily remote. So what do you think on that?
Yeah, so I think that the distinction you made is a very exact one. Work from home versus remote. Work from home is just migrating the same processes or the day-to-day that we had in our office, and
Right.
now we try to duplicate it and to shift it home and do what we used to do in the same
Right.
way we used to work, but we do that in a different environment.
Right.
Many companies, what we see today from the corona situation is mainly that, meaning companies were forced to leave offices and shifted whatever they could into a work from home model. They invested a lot in the technical enablement of work from home.
Mm-hmm.
So creating the communication channel, adapting those tools like Zoom, like Teams, like Slack, whatever you can use in order to communicate effectively. But many of them, some did, but many didn't adapt or change anything in the way they operate.
Right.
When we talk about remote work is much more than just working distributedly from different locations.
Right.
Remote work means adapting a certain way of work that realize the situation, the characteristics of what it really means to work remotely from each other, what it means to work in a distributed manner, what you can expect and what you shouldn't expect from your peers while you
Right.
work remotely. So, for example, if you work from the same office, you can raise your head, see that your friend is available, or even if it's not available, tap on his back and say, "Hey, man, I need your help, or can you support me here, or what did you do yesterday, or why did you do that?" When you work remotely, you don't know whether the person is available. You don't
Right.
know whether you can expect to get his immediate answer or whether it will take now 2 or 3 hours or sometimes even a day until you get his answer. So
Right.
you need to adapt and to change the way that you're operating and realize or expect the barriers or the difficulties, the limitations that you are going to experience and plan your work and build the way you are working to deal with that in the right way, in the accurate way. On the other hand, there are also many benefits
Mm-hmm.
when you that you gain while working from home. I think that maybe today the fact that all the family is at home with us might take some of those benefits and make them a bit harder to realize.
Right.
So usually on a regular situation, probably your kids, your family during the day will be in their businesses, kindergarten, schools, and so on, and you will have the ability, and I even would say the opportunity to focus on what you do and gain a deeper focus than you probably be able to achieve when you are working in an open space in a crowded office where there are a lot of people and many co-workers working next to you.
Right.
So these are maybe the benefits, some of one of the maybe one example of the benefits that you can achieve from remote work. What we can say, and we will touch about it a bit more during the discussions a little later, but we believe that the current situation maybe triggered the movement towards remote work. We
Right.
probably, I think what we already can see now that companies and executives who would never hear about the option to go remote, who would strongly believe that in their case, everything need to be centralized in one office. They now see the benefits, they see the possibilities, they see that it is possible to work in a distributed manner. So we believe that this situation would decrease the barrier with drop some limits and will allow the movement towards remote. We probably would also say that full adoption of remote and what it means full adoption we'll cover in a second might take some time and will be
Mm-hmm.
shaped in a different ways. But we definitely, I guess that what we see in a year from now would be totally different than what we saw just 1 month ago. And probably if we take it about 5 or 7 years forward, we definitely see a totally different landscape in terms of how the work environment looks like and how businesses are built. And I
Totally.
guess that one of the main foundations of that new model would be remote work.
Totally. Great points, Ronan. So one thing I totally liked is currently we're not remotely working. We are remotely working, but that's just work from home. It's not a remote workplace, right? Work, obviously, home is not an ideal workplace. There are a lot of factors there at home which does not make it an ideal workplace. And talking about adopting remote workforce or going remote as a strategic move. So companies now, since they're forced to work remotely, I think now is a good time for companies to experiment on having a remote workforce. Plus, while experimenting, collecting a lot of data. Like they should really leverage this situation and then probably use it after this pandemic is over. Can companies who were not okay to have remote workforce before COVID-19, can they have it after COVID-19 as well? Like maybe they, based on the data that they tell, maybe some companies would see that their people even after going remote they're more productive, than being
Yeah,
in office. Maybe some data can come, points can come up. I think managers are the ones who should really check on their teams to see if their team is performing well after COVID-19 as compared to before the day they went remote. And I think those data points would help them form a longer strategy. So what do you think on that point?
I think that's an excellent point. And really at the basis of that are two things. One of them is collecting the data or measuring the performance of the teams, and then a continuous improvement process that needs to be in place.
Right.
So all of the companies started with a copy paste, right? They took the office environment and moved it home, which of course is the wrong thing to do. And now, unfortunately, they have, weeks of working from home, and they have the opportunity week over week over week to improve their processes and
Right.
adapt to the new situation, right? So we always propose to companies that come for advice that they need to identify the core essence of their culture, the things that should not change, like, I don't know, quality or the way we treat each other, stuff like that. And everything else should be open for negotiation at these times, right? So I expect the senior managers, the managers, the developers, everyone to be in a, at least once a week in a discussion, in a session where they say, okay, what have we been doing right last week with respect to remote work and productivity and our ability to perform our task, right? And what are we going to improve and test and try next week, right? So it really is a case of what's called Kaizen. It's improving week after week after week till the company gets, hopefully at the end, to a remote work situation where productivity, engagement, and so on are really at high level. So that's the opportunity, right? That's making the lemons into a lemonade kind of situation.
Totally, totally. And so, talking about building remote company or building remote workforce, so what are the building blocks for building a remote company?
Well, it starts with building a strategy. Okay, so first thing, you need to understand why are you going remote. You're going remote because there's COVID out there. You're going remote because you want access to better talent. You're going remote because your office guys, Gen Y and Z, want more flexibility. You're going remote in order to save $10 million a year over your office space. Many different reasons, and understanding the reasons will help you build the strategy around in which time zones and locations you want to hire, strategy
Right.
about the level of flexibility you provide to your remote workers. Is it flexibility across the day, maybe flexibility across the week? Maybe
Right.
some of your guys will prefer to work shorter days and 7 days a week, and some of them will prefer to work longer days and 4 days a week, whatever.
Right.
I experienced both of these cases.
Mhm.
And looking into, building the remote work strategy, uh, you need to crystallize it into your work policy. Okay, and the policy is basically the contract between you and the employees. What do you expect from them, and what can they expect from you? Are their core hours defined by then? Your guys can work from anywhere, but you still expect them to be between, I don't know, 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., whatever time zone available
Right.
for synchronous communication, right? What about the flexible work? What about holidays? Lots and lots of stuff to discuss about the policy, and really need to iron that out first.
Right.
Yeah, I think that regarding policy, maybe it is the main building blocks or the main basis for creating a culture of remote. Since let's say that you are a newcomer to an organization and you come to the office for the first day. So even if you don't know what to expect or you don't know what is expected from you, you just look at others and imitate them and get to know what are the expectations from you.
Right.
And the basic for trust is expectation setup. You need to know what is expected from you, and then you can decide whether you fulfill the expectation or not, but at least everything is on the table. And in a remote environment, getting those expectations, realizing those expectations is not a trivial thing to do. So
Right.
the policy is the cornerstone for every remote organization. While having the policy, a clear policy, a live policy, something that keep on being modified, something that the organization defines, not someone within the organization, but everyone can contribute, everyone can shape, everyone can influence on, means that everyone knows what is expected from them. So they know that, for example, one of the maybe more trivial, most trivial examples we see about having remote meetings. Generally speaking, many of the times that people used to work in or at office, and now they have a meeting that they can take remote. They used to take it from phone while walking with their dog or driving the car, and not being focused on the meeting itself. But let's say that the policy says that all our meetings are done next to a desk, in front of a laptop, with a camera open, and that you are focused on the meeting. That's a totally different story.
Right.
So that's an example of what the policy is, and that's lead us to the very next item in the list, which is trust. Once the
Yeah.
expectations are clear, let the organization do what it is expected from them in a way that best fits for their culture or their preferences. So Gilad mentioned one aspect, the distribution of work across in the week, whether I work very condensed or whether I spread my work all over the week. It doesn't really matter. I don't being measured by the time that I work. I'm being measured by fulfilling what is expected from me in terms
Right.
of output and in terms of behavior.
Right.
Gilad, maybe
That's
you
it.
want.
You want to add
Sorry, go
anything?
ahead.
No, it's all about trust. If you're unable to build the trust, your company will fail, right? You cannot have the managers micromanaging everyone. You need to put a framework in place that enables the manager to know that their guys, are doing what is needed, and the guys feel that they are being trusted, and they get the space to create their craftsmanship. Let's put it this way.
Totally.
And
To, yeah. Totally on board that having clear guidelines definitely help, and those guidelines should always keep reiterating based on how your team is performing, and those can be different for different teams as well. Even there is a pandemic situation, a lot of companies have frozen hiring, but a lot of companies have actually doubled down on their hiring, right? Because since they're working, they are in more demand now, right? So what's your take on hiring remotely or building the whole hiring process but for remote employees, and especially for companies who have never done it before?
so that's actually the essence of Flatwood Core. At Flatwood Core, we understood the issue of hiring remotely, and we are trying to help the hiring managers to simplify and avoid some of the remote hiring pitfalls. So when you go out to hiring remote workers, some stuff gets really easy to do, and some gets much more complicated. So the easy stuff is to get candidates. Okay, there
Right.
are some relatively easy means to get 100 or 200 even applicants into your inbox. You can go into a couple of remote job boards, the large ones, advertise an ad, uh, be very fair with the salary that you want to put out. By the way, it's super common to put the salary in remote work ads out there. So you really state the salary inside the ad, and you also state the target time zones, right? It's some of the stuff that maybe you are not used to do when you are putting a local ad.
Right.
And if you go to the right remote job board, and you put a nice ad for a nice company and a good job description and what's in it for the developer or whoever, the remote talent that needs to join, you'll get many tens of candidates, which is like a good problem, right? Because when you hire locally, usually your issue is that you don't get enough
Right.
candidates. So suddenly you got many tens of candidates, but it is still a problem because now you need to sift through the CVs and see which one of those, let's say 100 candidates, makes sense, right?
Right.
And as an example, right now at Flatworld, we are helping a startup company, a distributed startup company with headquarters in the Silicon Valley to hire a couple of full stack developers. And before they approached us, the CEO told me that they interviewed almost 100 candidates to find nothing, right? So when you do the remote hiring, you need to change the way you treat the funnel. You need to filter people up front as much as possible for technical skills and try to eliminate along the funnel as many of the candidates as possible to get to a manageable number that you can actually interview.
Right.
And when you look at remote workers, let's say that you got the technical filtering in place, we found out that there are personality aspects that are super critical in order to create the right matching between uh, a worker and being a remote worker. That would be step number one. Not everyone are fit to be a remote worker, right?
Right.
Some cannot manage, their day to day. Some will get too much, isolated or isolation, and it some are too junior to work remotely. They need someone more close by to help them. So not everyone are fit to be remote workers. But then even those that are fit to be a remote worker, personality trait influence what's the right company for that specific remote worker, right? Because some companies are, fully remote. Some companies are hybrid, which means partially remote and partially local. Some
Right.
are new to remote work. Some are veterans in remote work. Some companies, the team, communicates with each other all day long, and others, the communication is very sparse and asynchronously. So the personality traits of the remote worker really you need to look at that at the fit to the company. So it goes beyond what goes, people used to call it cultural fit, which later on got formed on due to diversity and stuff. But it's you really need to see if that remote worker is right for your company and is right for the specific team and the way the team behaves.
Right.
These are the complexities, right? So the good
Right.
news, yes, you're going to get tens of candidates. The bad news, you need to find how to find, how to sort them out and find the right guys over there. And by the way, a phenomena which not many talk about, but it's there. There's also fraud involved sometimes, right? So you also need to keep an eye for fraud and
Yeah.
make sure that the guy you interview is or that applies is actually the guy that you hire and don't let me get started on this one. Anyway, that's exactly the hiring complexity is what we try to simplify for the hiring manager at at Flatworld Co. and helping them build those hyper performing remote teams very very easily.
Totally. You have anything to add, Ronan, on that?
Yeah, maybe just to try to connect all the dots that we talked during this call. So we
Mm-hmm.
talked about the movement or the shift towards remote, whether it is work from home, or whether it
Right.
is fully remote, or whether it is somewhere in the middle. We talked about how remote should be built properly, should be adapted properly. I would even emphasize here that it's like a layered approach. You need to build layer by layer in order to have an organization that fully operates properly in a remote environment.
Yep.
And Gilad just covered what we are dealing, what is our day-to-day life in flatworld.co, which is the hiring aspect. You need to know how to do hiring for remote. So companies that are willing to go remote not necessarily need to handle the hiring by themselves. They can approach us and we do the hiring from them, and by
Got it.
that sparing them the effort. The nice thing to see, and I think that if we are looking a bit forward and where what's going to be there the day after the coronavirus situation, assuming that it will be end, and we now also already know that it probably won't be over never. The way we used to work is going to change, but we're definitely going to see different forms of remote. We're going to see companies who already decided, or will decide just as we speak, to move remote, and they will abandon their offices. They will abandon the way they used to work, or maybe they didn't used to work. They weren't used to work that way. They never work, and they will decide to build themselves as a fully remote organization. There are already about 250, almost 3,000 organizations who are already operating this way even before the Corona situation, and I guess we will see more and more like that. But most likely, what we'll see organizations that adopting some kind of a hybrid approach. We see
Right.
organizations that will have some of their workforce working locally from offices, but some will work remotely, either because they will be forced to do so because of the situation will continue, or because some of the workforce will decide that this model is better for him and would like to adopt that way. And this is exactly the opportunity here. We will be able to see organization who find the right balance of what's the right level of remote versus local, what's the right processes and culture that they need to adapt in order to support this approach. We probably will also see situation where part of the organization is working locally from office, and in that case, those people will work closely together, but part will work remotely, and in that case, we will start seeing remote teams. So we will have a local team working locally and adopting one way of work, and then a remote team, a team of members who are working distributedly from different locations, who work together as a unified, hyper-performing team. And this is one of the offerings that we are also providing to our customers, to build for them those hyper-performing remote teams that will enable them to extend and to grow with the remote model, even if the rest of the organization is local. So there will be an hybrid culture within the organization. And I guess that we will see many other flavors and levels of adoptions of remote that will either be forced or will be decided by the organization. It's a matter of the
Right.
reality that we're going to operate, but we're definitely going to see a totally different world in terms of the work environment that we're going to operate.
For sure, just echoing what you said, right? The after effects of COVID-19 on having remote workforce is gonna be different for each of the companies, and it has to be decided by the company itself. And obviously, the people will help the company decide, right? Because as also said before, not every individual is eligible to work remotely. Like it would depend on people to people, teams to teams, and that's how the company overall will decide what approach they wanna do. But as you said, Ron, there's a lot of space for innovation, right? When the 2000 economic crisis happened, there was a lot of companies that were started, like Uber, there's Airbnb, there's WhatsApp, such great companies or such innovative companies. They started in 2008 when the world was going through a crisis, and similar kind of crisis we are in right now. But so, do you think that there is a lot of innovation or a lot of new things that will happen in terms of remote, working?
Definitely.
Definitely. So Sunil, we're going to see, you know, first of all, let's look at everything related to online, right? Businesses are moving online for
Right.
continuity. Delivery businesses are blooming even more than they, were before. You see now every grocery store or toy shop having a delivery service. So
Yeah.
that's going to be amazing. And specifically for with respect to remote work and continuity of businesses, anything we see since Ronen and I, we do monitor the job boards for companies that are still hiring. We
Hmm.
see the fintech very strong, online fintech on hiring, as well as companies, usually small scale startup companies right now, that are in the business of enabling remote operation.
Hmm.
So anything that enables remote operation, remote collaboration, tracking of productivity, tools for the managers to manage their distributed team and help them with the management of the situation, video communication. And all of that is blooming, and we see that definitely in the job board. So there's going to be lots of demand, and as Ronen said, it's gonna look differently later after the
Totally.
COVID, and I'm not sure how it's very different or just a bit different, but it's gonna be different for sure.
Totally on the same point, like with Ronan and Gilad, you both. So I think we have reached the course here for this episode. But I have a few lightning questions for both of you guys, and maybe you can just answer, like, whatever's on top of your mind. So since everyone is remote now, and I think they have a lot of time on their hand since they're home, they save a lot of time traveling and stuff like that. So what are some of the, like, what is that one book that you would recommend to the listeners, like from both of you?
So it's really depends if I come from the remote kind of thing. So
Mm.
I would advise managers out there to take a look at a book about remote work, which was written quite a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Remote Office Not Required.
Mm-hmm.
It's really light reading, amazing book
Mm-hmm.
that really was created before its time about remote work, and there are also some large online blogs about remote work, like
Right.
the ultimate guide to remote work by Zapier,
Yeah.
and out of office, a guide to establishing a remote culture, and so on and so on. Tons of good reading and education. Time
Totally.
time to catch up and join the future
Right.
because it's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
And
and what?
uh, for me, I'm not sure that I can point for a specific book, but I can share what I do these days. So, every crisis has an opportunity within it.
Right.
And I think that the situation that we are here right now is such an opportunity to grow and to practice whatever you don't manage to do on your day to day. So on one hand, and on the other hand, there are amazing initiatives by many organizations who open a lot of their content for free. So, for example, Plural site, the education site, has now a free April where all of their offering is offered for free during this phase.
Mm-hmm.
So you can either deepen whatever skill set you already have. You can either practice in skills that you always wanted and never had the chance to do. But you can. It is definitely the time to spend to invest in yourself, to
Right.
grow, to turn the crisis into opportunity, to look optimistically on the future and see how you get out of this situation stronger and much more mature than we maybe were drifted into.
Totally. I think people can definitely reskill and upskill themselves, right? So my next question would be, what keeps you both going, and what's the motivation for you guys?
Before practicing remote or as part of my experience, I used also to support many organizations in their agile transformation. And similar to agile, also apply for remote. I personally believe that this is the right way to do things. It's not a matter of choice. It's not a matter, it is the evolution, and this is the right way that things need to be built.
Mhm.
So I don't see it as, it's not an option. I believe in that. I believe that this is the right thing. Whenever I talk to someone or speak to someone and discuss with him whether he comes to ask for advice or whether he just describe the challenges and the situation that he is facing,
Mhm.
and you see you know what the solution. The solution is adapt the right processes, and the solution is adapt the right operational way. So you don't need to be strict with the limitation of the local geography. You don't need to spend a lot of resources on being local. You don't need to spend a lot of time on commute every morning. There are opportunities. You don't necessarily need to go all the way, but you definitely need to adapt and take whatever fits you and cherry pick whatever practices fit you. And so for me, it's not a matter of what keeps me driving. This is the reality. There is no other way of doing that.
Right.
And for me, I would say it's the innovation. I am a type of person that's an early adopter. That's my character. I'm early adopter of technology, and as a hiring manager, I've always been early adopter of all sort of organizational, cultural kind of things, starting with agile, extreme programming, inner sourcing, open sourcing, whatever. And I just enjoy, being ahead of the curve
Right.
with these things, and then, support others and help them catch along. That's part of the battery that keeps me running and, smiling and enjoying what we are doing over there. Definitely.
That's great. And I think I have one last question for you guys before we part off. So what would be that one advice that you would give to your 25-year-old self if you got a chance to call him up today?
I once got a very memorable advice, something that I took, I think, from the same age. So I would say that the best advice that I got and can provide to others is stop and think before you answer or before you react. I
Mhm.
think that my 25 years person was the one who was impulsively, immediately answer, reacting. There are many good things in doing that, but sometimes or many of the times it's not the right thing to do. So, and I see today, after 15 years or 20 years later, adopting this stop, think, and react after counting to 10 makes the difference. So that would be my advice.
That's very thoughtful, yeah.
Mhm.
What about
And
you?
and
Hmm.
and the interesting thing about Ronen and myself is that we complement each other. So my advice would be to myself would be exactly the opposite, because I started as, a person that is first, stayed for 18 years in his first job, right? I started as an intern, finished as director of technology. I actually would advise myself not to miss out on things, and not to be too scary to try and jump into the water. So I think that that's exactly where Ronan and myself are crossing our roads, where we come from and meet in the middle.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, great. And
Mhm.
still you both ended up being co-founders of this amazing company. So that's really great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
Awesome. So thanks a lot, Ronan, and thanks a lot, Gilad, for joining us today. I mean, this has been an interesting episode.
talking
Yeah,
to you today.
thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
very much, Sunil.